So happy to see that the project is working. Hey guys, I'm Nicky Romero. We're here at the Protocol Studios and another Masterclass video, a remix for David Guetta, Martin Garrix, So Far Away, and we're going to talk about this one today. Hope you guys enjoy it. So far. Okay, here we go. So Far Away for Martin Garrix and David Guetta. Well, first of all, I was really happy to get this one because Martin sent me a demo already like 3 months ago before it was released with a different singer on it, and I said like I love this record, so I got the opportunity to remix, and I was like that's great because this song just feels like it invites me almost to make a remix of it. And the only thing though, we had 2 days to do it because we were abroad, so we couldn't really, be in the studio, and it needed to be done in 2 days. Like, yeah, so they gave us a week or so to work on it, or maybe a week and a half, but then I was not in Holland, so I couldn't work on it. I'm not good at producing at laptops, so lucky enough, everything just went right, and we got a result pretty quickly. The most important thing, and actually it was the biggest struggle of this remix, was the fact that the original song is so much slower than what I'm usually working at. Let's say 126, 127, 128. The remix for the Chainsmokers was 120. So we had to work with that tempo difference. So it's really challenging to have a song that's recorded at 150 beats per minute to take that down to 126 without feeling too slow and a significant amount of quality loss. So 2 things you have to think about when stretching. How do you start with making a tempo difference like that sound decent? I'm particularly saying decent, not great, because it's never going to sound better, of course, than the original. There's always going to be some quality loss. In my experience, there's a software package called Studio One, and this is how it looks like. That's much better in stretching than Logic is, or than maybe Ableton is. I know that Ableton has a decent function. With Complex Pro, you can get really good results, but Studio One has an engine that's just so much better than most of the other things out there. A great way of stretching your, for example, guitar vocals without the extreme quality loss that you'll get in Logic. Not even talking about timing things, because the timing with slowing down a song like that or speeding it up, if you would like half time at 75 BPM, then you're gonna have to speed it up. The timing is gonna mess up as well. So I imported all the stems that I got from Martin into my Studio One project, and I stretched everything from 75 or 150 to 126. And I thought bringing it up to 128 is gonna sound not natural. And 126 was kind of the only BPM where I was like, okay, this sounds like close to natural. There's quite some people that said that the verses sound too slow. Well, the verses are not anything slower than the chorus and then the other parts of the song. So it's just a feeling because of the instruments. And yeah, it is a little bit slower, but it was the only way of working it. So it was really challenging to have a vocal stem of 2 people singing at the same time, male and female, then stretching them, pitching them, and also bringing them down in tempo. And then with reverb and delay on it is going to be really hard to have that sound, decent. And I think the result is pretty well. Now, but you're not picking up. Shadows so close. If you're still in love, then let 'em match, baby, in the dark. Show me where you are. Oh, love, how wish you never see me. And I thought it would be cool to add some strings. There were some strings in the original song already, and I can play them for you here. It's this one's a little bit further. added some other strings, and they come from a plugin called Contact, and there is a band called Symphobia that has amazing strings, or LA strings, amazing string sounds, and I played something on top of the original parts, and that sounds like this. And if you merge them together, and without my part, and with my part, so there you go. You have your stretched synths, your stretched vocals. What are you gonna do? Because the song is pretty particular, and it has its own feeling to it. The original mix was done so well. Big props to Martin and David for doing that single, because it sounds really, really good and really catchy. And I thought, I don't want to use the original synths. I don't want to use that that sounds neither. So like the I want to move away from that, and I want to bring the song a little bit something of how I would do it. Otherwise, like, my remix wouldn't have the same value, I think. So I thought of what can I add to the song that does not like take the original parts down and still gives that feeling that it sounds like me a little bit. Well, that's a challenge. Next to the stretching, that's the hardest part of doing a remix. How do you bring something that you do to the song without quality loss or without breaking down the original, the feeling of the original mix? So I tried like 15 approaches and 15 different melodies, and I came up with this MIDI part. And I was just sitting behind the piano playing something like, I think there's a couple of layers here that can play it. And so that was the melody that I played, and the interesting part of it is that it starts before the one, so it has like that little step up, like da 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 da, and then it actually starts with the one, and that also brings quite some interesting situations, because the MIDI, all of the MIDI information that you have needs to be one block earlier than the one, and that's really unnatural if you're used to work with all the blocks like starting from the one. So I messed up a lot of times in this project, and I only had 2 days. So I worked like almost the whole night to get everything fixed and done. But in the end of the day, I think we can be happy with the result. And there's the one. So that's so different from most of the other songs. At the same time, it's unique. So I think it also, adds some of that little spark to the remix that I would normally have done. So that is that little thing going on there. Next to all the layers that we have, it's about, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I can go through them a little bit. Really high note played by Nexus, and a really simple saw with a lot of reverb to give that massive feeling and that space feeling. Same synth playing under that one, also the same Nexus, just an octave lower. So you have that part of the spectrum covered as well. Then there's this synth that's actually really ugly. but it brings a little bit of presence in the mix. Sometimes if you have these nice polished synthesizers that sound well solo, they don't blend in as nice. And sometimes there's a sound that you would never have picked solo that works great in the mix because it covers frequency spectra that other synths don't have, you know, and sometimes even a synth can sound really ugly and out of control solo, but then it can blend in really well in the whole package. Well, this is an example. It's actually horrible if you listen to it solo, but if you have the whole part and if you have the whole bus, it's not that bad. And if I mute it, it sounds too polished. It sounds too sweet almost. So it brings some dearth to the synth bus. So adding in and blending in synths that don't sound great solo can be a really good way of making the overall sound better, or maybe more how do I say that best? More interesting, less polished, less perfect, and less sweet. So Silent has a lot of bangs, but you know, you can do it basically with any synth. It's just either Spire, Silent, or Serum, Nexus anyway these days. But there's even plugins in Logic, if you work with Logic, that can do the same trick. ES2, even Retro Synth can be used to have that actually ugly synth that characterizes your synth bus. What else is playing? Well, there's this famous noise synth that I also talked about in the PRTCL song. That's giving that presence again, and I will mute it for you to see what it does. Just a synth bus. It's kind of hard to hear it in this synth bus because the other synths already have so much noise in them that it's really hard to pick it out as easy as with PRTCL with that song. But the reason why you want to have this solo is so you have more control over the volume, over the EQ, over how the levels, the flanger. If you use a white noise that's built in a synth and that's already used on top of a sound, then you don't have the same control as if you separate the noise from the synth. So that's the reason why I do it that way. There's some compression going on there, but it's mainly for sidechain. And this time I used a trigger that comes from, that's basically just MIDI notes here playing. Because sometimes in some songs, when it's like progressive big house, for the mid spectrum, a compressor just sounds more natural. It sounds more like it's flowing. There's plugins that do a great job, and I'm talking about, for example, LFO2 or Kickstart, that do a great job, but sometimes they're so perfect and timing-wise so polished that a compressor does a better job with making it feel natural. That's the reason why sometimes using a compressor can give a different result, even though there's less control over the actual sound. So I thought on this remix it was just sounding better and more natural. Not too much sidechain going on, because otherwise it's going to sound too compressed, or it sucks in the sound too much and then it loses clarity overall. So if I would play without, Another small thing that's used a lot, as you can see here, is it's actual MIDI information that triggers the sidechain. If you want the sidechain to duck a little bit earlier than when the synth is playing, so you can make sure that the transients are not interfering with the punch of the kick, you can actually delay or actually pre-delay the MIDI sound trigger to make sure that it triggers the compressor to duck a little bit before that the transient of the kick comes in. So it's not always necessary, but when you have a synth that's really aggressive on the transients, then it can be better to delay or pre-delay your sidechain a little bit in order like it ducks in time, or actually before the synth starts playing. So that's something that I sometimes do. I didn't do it in this song, but I did it with Novell in order to get that synth structure sound better in the mix. Well, with all these remixes, something interesting going on here with the bass. As you can see, it's 3 layers, and I will play them for you. They're split up in 3 different sounds. Again, so you have more control over every spectrum of the bass. I'd like to make sure that the sub bass is separated from the rest, because it needs a little bit more sidechain and it needs a little bit more EQ treatment to make it sound right in the mix usually. So I like to have that done by a sine wave or a square wave, depending on how you like it best, or triangle. Knife Party, Garrett, I think it was Garrett or Rob told me once that it's better to use a triangle, I think, because it goes lower. Anyway, I'm not that great at the technical side of it. Separating the 3 of them gives you a lot of control over the sound. And usually the top bass here has a little bit less sidechain compression than the sine wave, because it takes a lot more energy in the mix. But what's interesting here is that it's playing notes, same as with the synthesizers, as with the synths. You want to make sure that it has the same key at the right timing. So it basically slides to the next note before the synth is actually playing that note. So therefore you get that feeling that you get lift up before the chord changes in the chords, or when the chord is changing, or when the note is changing in the actual synths. So therefore it feels like it lifts you up to the next note already before it's being played. And that was interesting to do, because you need to make sure that the bass has that same glide and portamento structure. And as you can see, it's all audio instead of MIDI information, because then you have much more control over what's going on. So I made sure that the notes were gliding up with the portamento function in, for example, silent, or when it comes to Nexus, you select that mod click, and then you click, I think it was a glide as well, or it was portamento, and you click 132, 164, depending on how quickly you want it to shift. You can also do it with the pitch bend, but it's going to be much more work, and I'm just simply too lazy to do so. Also, we had only 2 days again, so it was a quick fix. So yeah, make sure to glide at the same time, because otherwise it's going to be so hard to mix it. That's the bass. There's chords playing here, and they're so easy. They're actually taken from a project of Young, and because I just didn't have the time to take new ones. It's Serum, and the chords of a progressive track are usually just following the bass notes. So when the bass is playing an A, you take an A chord or an A minor chord, or major, depending on how you play it, of course. But it's always following the bass, and then you add like 2 notes on top. And there's a really cool website called Hook Theory that helps you how to develop that skill of programming chords. But it's all about numbers. So for example, if you would play an A minor, that's 1, 3, 5. And if you follow that theory, and then you can just follow the bass note and add the 3 and the 5 on top of it, or under it, or you can even add a 7 if you want to. That's really advanced stuff, but it's really easy to find the chords for a song as long as you follow the bass note. And if you don't have the bass note, you can just replay the original demo as long as you need to take to find the bass note. And there's websites that also give you the keys. But that's how the chords usually work. And sometimes it's also good to break out of the rules and just make your own chords as long as they sound good together. There is no golden rule how to do it. Music sometimes is just also making mistakes that brings new things to the table. So really don't need to stress out about it. I got the question a lot, how to do chords. Usually it's just really easy nexus chords, and they always follow the bass note. There we go, the magic Masterchain. There are like thousands and thousands of threads on how to master your song, and I've got that magic Masterchain that makes my song sound so much better than anyone else. In my honest opinion, there is no magic Masterchain. It all comes down how you make the puzzle. If you make a puzzle and you know it's on your taste, you need to make sure that all the pieces have their own spot. And if they have their own spot, they glue together easily and it looks like a picture. That's exactly how it goes with mastering songs and mastering audio. Every little sound and every little thing needs to have its own purpose to end up nice in the mix. Calvin Harris is doing a great job on that. I really admire his work for Slide, for example, bringing such natural instruments and at the right volume, at the right space in the song. That's a great example for me sometimes to listen to. And it all sounds great on radio as well. That's another trick. Making radio mixes is so much different than club. There's a few plugins that I always use, and one of them, the plugins that I always use, is the UAD. Universal Audio is a great resource that helps my mixes sound so much better. They add some freshness and the compression and the emulation of the actual instruments or the actual mixers that are being used. Like this one is a Neve and then like a nice software version of it. But it still comes close to the real thing. Of course, it's not exactly the same as the analog stuff, but it gets you so close that you can barely hear the difference between the real analog and the digital version of it. So the 88RS of UAD is for me like a definitely go-to. Another secret weapon of the UAD spectrum is also the 80, or it's actually called the Legacy. Let me see if I find it here. And if you use UAD plugins, it's always good to use them on buses, not on the same bus as the sidechain, because the delay compensation will get you in trouble with your sidechain. That's what I found out. Something that we've been trying to figure out for a long time. But there is a plugin from UAD, and I will open it up real quick, that caught my attention, and that's basically present in every mix. And it's called the Pultec. There we go. The Pultec Legacy. This EQ, which kind of it is, allows you to select a frequency here, and so also you don't look at the EQ too much. You just select a frequency and you can boost that particular frequency. You can determine the bandwidth, like how much it affects the area, but it gives that little touch, that air, especially on a vocal or on a synth, that like there's no other synth, there's no other plugin that does the same thing. So for me, the UAD Pultec Pro and the 88RS are must-haves. Another good one would be the maximizer of the Precision bundle, but as I'm traveling, I don't always have access to all the plugins. But these two are definitely good go-tos. As you can see here, it's again on the stems, especially for the high and for the mid frequencies. They just really help you a lot. So on the Masterchain, what else is there next to the 88RS, next to the Sample Magic? An EQ for a low cut, which is here just 41 to make sure that it's not lower than necessary. What else is there? There's a limiter that barely does anything. It's plus 0.5, that's it. And I always put it on transparent because it doesn't touch the mix. And sometimes a limiter can also just mess up the mix a little bit. For me, it's personal style. Transparent worked the best. Last thing, the inflator. What does it actually do? UAD offers now the Oxford inflator in their bundle. It used to be just their software of Sonox, but now it's also in UID without latency on the highest quality and actually a working GUI, which is really great. And what is it doing? It's basically blowing up your mix until it's 0 dB, and you can play around with the effect to give it that little bit oversaturated feeling. But I basically just use it to boost volumes until we reach 0 dB as much as possible. And again, it's also not about the loudness of a song. The loudest song is definitely never sounding the best live. The ones that have more dynamics, take Reload of Sebastian Ingrosso and Tommy Trash, still is one of the best sounding dynamic songs that there is. If you play it live, it still goes off, and it's still mix-wise kind of kills the other songs. It's just the magic to that song and also the mix of the dynamics. So don't get confused about the loudness of your song. It's about how it sounds like live. So that's it for this video. If you guys have anything to ask that I did not have in this video, or if there's anything you want to know specifically about a track, about a sound, let me know in the comments down on YouTube. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and if there's anything else you want to ask me, feel free. If you want to send music, feel free to do so as well. My name is Nicky Romero. See you in the next one.